Jaycee Horn's hamstring injury. Brian Burns' contract negotiations continue. The Panthers' wide receiver room. Are they good enough? Can they separate? Can they get better? And thoughts about Bryce Young's first appearance as a Carolina Panther and how he can improve against the New Orleans Saints. Let's catch up with Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observer and check the beat. All right, we're here with Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observer. Mike, the Panthers are coming off a week 1 loss, and there's some big headlines in the news. I want you to rank these stories for me in order of importance. Horn's hamstring injury, Burns contract negotiation, Panthers wideout room's ability or capability.
Horn 1, wide receivers 2, Burns' contract 3. I mean, the guy to start with 3, Brian Burns said he's going to play. I mean, he played without a new contract agreement. So really, not sure if that was the best play for him, but it was the best play for the Panthers and probably for the Panthers fans. I think cornerback getting to 1, this defense is very top heavy. They do not have a lot of depth. We talked about it during the summer. You and I have talked about it privately. They do not have a lot of second team depth. And look, I think CJ Henderson had a really good training camp. He had a really terrible end of the preseason. I thought he was fine in this game. I don't think he was terrible. I mean,
visibly, he got, kind of got thrown not under the bus, but we're all looking at the Pitts play and going, oh, he stinks. But he made some good plays in that game.
Well, and I would say, too, Pitts is 5 inches taller and contorted his body in a way that most humans can't. So I think, that 34-yard bomb was huge, obviously, because it basically sealed the game. But Desmond Ridder threw 6 passes he threw 9 passes that were not to running backs, and he was 6 of 9 in the passing game. Oh, and by the way, one of those he caught himself. So I think the passing defense played well, all things considered. I just don't know if you're going to get like a frontline guy to replace Jaycee Horn in free agency. I don't think this team's one cornerback away either, so I don't know if it's worth spending the money and potentially irritating somebody else. And then, look, wide receiver, they're without their top speedster. We talk about the need for speed. Well, DJ Chark is that guy coming off a hamstring injury. And, well, I don't know if he'll be officially back this week because hamstrings are kind of tricky. I do think that if they can get him back in the lineup and he can keep going, he can take the top off the defense a little bit, which will allow for underneath routes to break open. I think that was something they were really missing in this game. I think you saw Hayden Hurst, who's actually very fast for a tight end, not be able to break open just because the attention was so much on him and the limited weapons that they had. So I think they have a lot of confidence in Chark, and so I think it's kind of like it's a touch and go situation, but I think Jaycee Horn missing a decent amount of time is something that, based on previous history is a problem, especially because, not even talking about depth, Jaycee Horn missed 17 games in his first 2 seasons due to various injuries. He's going to probably miss his 18th. I know there are reports out there that he could miss multiple weeks, but like in reality, when you miss, 18 to 20 games your first 3 years, it's almost impossible to not call somebody injury prone, whether they're the same injuries or not, because when he is on the field, he is a difference maker.
Let's dive into Horn's injury, as we know that Horn suffered a foot injury in his rookie season and missed, I think it was 13 games, and then another 4 with a fractured wrist. He had an ankle problem throughout the preseason, and in week 1 early, I think it was in the second quarter, he pulls up lame. Tell for the listeners, what is Horn's injury, which most people know already, but what's his status? Because some news supposedly broke today.
Well, it's not my reporting, so it's hard for me to confirm the length, but what I would say is he's got a hamstring injury, and those are typically multiple week injuries. I think it's not like a far shot in the dark to be presumptuous and say that he will miss time. That said, If it's a minor hamstring injury, then maybe he only misses a week or two. If it's a major hamstring injury, those can be extremely lingering, and you never know when that's kind of going to recover. So, I think they kind of dodged a bullet in that it's not an Achilles injury. It's a soft tissue injury that once he's back, he can be back, but it's certainly not a great situation to have.
How do you think he, or is there any sense of how this is, affecting him continuing? Because we heard Dante Jackson speak about, how it just stinks to get kind of the funk of an injury prone label. Dante Jackson's dealt with injuries himself. And, these guys are looking at Jaycee Horn. They know how such a good player he is. And now they're kind of like they're struggling with it. How do you think Horn is handling this, and maybe even the team looking at it?
So I wasn't in Atlanta. I had a family thing, but I did cover the game from home. I was in the locker room yesterday. I did talk to Frank. I do think, there's frustration. Like you said, I think Dante Jackson kind of put a bow on it. He is Jaycee Horn has pushed back against the label of being injury prone in the past. He didn't like talking about the ankle injury during the summer.
Right.
So I'm sure it's frustrating for him because he's a guy who's constantly compared to Patrick Surtain, who is probably the best corner in the league right now, outside of maybe Sauce Gardner. He's seeing all these guys kind of become like the top tier corners. And in theory, based on talent and what we've seen, he should be talked about among that group. And unfortunately, these injuries have consistently plagued him. And I think, that's got to wear on anybody, right? In any profession. If you're constantly inconsistently available, the number one ability is availability. And he has not been that. And I think that kind of, you're here, I'll give you another angle of this. Brian Burns, who's made himself available all the time. He's been extremely healthy throughout his career. He's put up insane numbers, and he's in a contract dispute with the Panthers. Like, it's not like it was just nothing's easy. And I think, having that injury prone label makes things even harder.
Well, going back to the Panthers wideout room, is we saw a lot. You see fans talking on the internet, armchair quarterbacking is easy, and they talk about the lack of separation. People were freaking out after the game on our post-game show about play calling, all of this. And I'm really not, my concern level is not through the roof for any of this. Frank Reich said, look, is like, speed, it matters in the league. Tyreek Hill, he's a guy that has he's a next level speed. And when you do see Tyreek Hill, he's in a different level, like he's saying. He said that he trusts in the speed and the capability of these guys. DJ Chark is a guy who's struggled with injuries throughout his career. Is there thought that he can return for this week? And do you have a sense that the Panthers believe that this group is capable of improving throughout the season?
Well, I get a sense that there's a lot of optimism this week. He was a limited participant on Friday. That's helpful.
Right.
The fact that he was able to practice. The one question I would have is he is a speed guy. So if his hamstring is even the least bit bothering him, it's going to hinder his, superpower, so to speak. And so that would be the only reason why I think you would hold him back. But if he is healthy, he will go. But there does seem to be a lot of optimism. I don't want to again, it's a hamstring injury. They're unpredictable. You could have a setback, but I would say there's a lot of optimism. At least that's my sense. Amir Smith-Marset has got blazing speed, but he's also learning the offense, right?
And learning not to run at the damn end zone.
Yeah, I spoke to him about that yesterday, one-on-one, and he told me, well, we can get into it later, but not to sidetrack, but he acknowledged that was not the best spot for him to be in. He started at the 20, the punter hit a booming punt, and he kind of lost track of where he was on the field. But he said, if he could take it back, he would. Anyway, but at wide receiver, there were videos made showcasing how slow this wide receiver group is. I think, for a rookie quarterback, speed is great and everything, but I think having technicians and guys that can get to their spot is a smarter approach. I think that's what Frank Reich was trying to say. Terrace Marshall had some really good moments. He also had some miscommunications. It's week one. I think Jonathan Mingo kind of showed you what he has been kind of all summer. He'll flash a lot of brilliance, and then you'll kind of forget he's there. So I think he's just kind of learning and getting into that Z receiver role right now. But yeah, I think speed is a problem if you really look at it. But I also think like the Panthers are taking this like 2016 Eagles approach to this team building. It's where they're trying to like set up foundational pieces and get things in motion. And then by hopefully next year, they'll be able to go out and spend on weapons and kind of fill the nest, so to speak. And the Eagles obviously won a Super Bowl in 2017 after that 2-year rebuild. I think the expectations for this team were, at least nationally, were like really high for really no proven reason. And I hate to be the wet blanket here. And
you've been consistent with this when we spoke last time, is that those were inflated, you felt like?
Yeah, I think this team is a 2-year rebuild. I think they're a 7 to 8 win team, and you're going to take your lumps. And if Bryce Young comes out of it smelling like roses, then that's fine. That's what this season's about. This season is about Bryce Young. And I think, it wasn't a great start. There were moments, as Frank Reich alluded to, that were fine. I actually thought the play calling was fine.
Me too, except for only one play call that was upsetting, and that's the fourth and one play call, because we don't really have a power back and a power run game, and it just was kind of lame. But other than that, everything was just really, it was, I think I'm one of the few people that was optimistic about the performance by the Carolina Panthers. And if anything, the only disappointing part to this real thing is that they squandered an opportunity to win a game.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I agree with you. I think going forward on 4th and 1 was absolutely the right answer. That play call was not. If you're within your opposing team's 15 in a scoreless game in the first half, you go for it. That's not about analytics. That's about game flow. I mean, it is about analytics.
And on the road too, week 1, like you're flowing and feeling good at that point.
The defense just had an incredible series on the previous possession.
You marched like 80 yards down the field. It felt like it took like 25 minutes. It felt like.
I'm a big believer that if you go for field goals within the 30 in the first half in a tight game, like, that's fine, but you're playing not to lose.
Right.
And I think Frank Reich made the right call there, not the right play call.
Right.
And so you learn from those moments. But I think being aggressive there was absolutely the right call. If they score 7 points there, the complexion of this game changes exponentially, because the Falcons couldn't do anything.
Nothing. Yeah, and they would have had to try to throw the ball more, and that would have given Brian Burns a lot more opportunity. Speaking of Brian Burns, boy, a lot of tension, or at least visibly, it seems like, is like Brian Burns, good soldier all throughout training camp. And then you start to see kind of some visible signs, maybe when it comes to him sitting out of practice leading up to week 1, as well as you see his dad on Instagram saying Brian Burns is not happy. Now, he could be talking about him in that golf cart, but everybody's reading into that. And then you get the Brian Burns sad Spider-Man post. And, it's clear that there's some frustration coming. 2023 wasn't a good year for the Carolina Panthers, but I'm trying to make 2024 a better one for myself. Get started on your resolutions with Factor so you're ready for the new year. Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success in the new year. Skip the grocery stores, prep work, and cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. With over 35 meals to choose from per week, including keto options, calorie smart, vegan plus veggie, and more, plus over 55 weekly add-ons, you'll have a ton of nutritious and flavorful options to kickstart your resolutions. Skip that overpriced takeout trap. Factor is cheaper and way more delicious than takeout. Get chef-crafted, restaurant-quality meals delivered right to your door, and they're ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, which means more time for you.
Head to factormeals.com/C350 and use the promo code C350 to get 50% off. That's code C350 at factormeals.com/C350 to get 50% off.
About with those contract negotiations, he goes out there, has a big 1.5 sacks, a forced fumble. I mean, in quarter one, he's looking like he's trying to get paid more than Bosa at that point. What do you think? Where are the contract negotiations? And where is the holdup, do you think? Do you think it's money? Do you think it's length of contract, guaranteed money? Or the Panthers just not valuing him at the rate that he thinks he should be valued? Or does nobody freaking know?
I think it's a little bit of nobody freaking knows, but I also do think it's all of the above. I think, this is a big contract negotiation when a player thinks that he deserves top of the market money, and then a guy just not only eclipses the market, but hurdles it. It can create an issue. So earlier on in the offseason, I was asked this question a lot for my mailbags, and I thought the comparison for him would be Max Crosby.
That's what the Panthers seemingly thought too.
Well, the difference here is you've got to make up for inflation and age. Right. So also, Brian Burns is coming off being paid like a first-round pick. Max Crosby was paid like a day 3 pick, right? So the inflation of raise is different, right? Like if you're making $85,000 and you get a $5,000 raise to 90, that's different than making $60,000 and then going to 70, right? And so, what I would say is this: Crosby's a good template prior to Bosa signing. Now that Bosa has signed, that template's out the window. Like if they would have gotten this deal done in
6 months ago.
Yeah, 6 months ago, I think that's the good template, but
it would have been $25 million.
Right.
You say because you just give the year inflation like you're talking about.
Yeah, you give the inflation, you give more guaranteed money. Maybe
another year, maybe one more year too.
Well, and for him, if he wants a shorter term contract, that makes a lot of sense because you want to hit free agency again before you turn 30.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
All the money's going up. But if you're the Panthers and you're saying, hey, I'm going to guarantee this guy all this money, you probably want him in-house for longer because you don't want to have to deal with this in 3 to 4 years. I think what the Chiefs just did with Chris Jones is really smart. I think that maybe that could have happened had Brian Burns been like, hey, I'm going to miss this game. I don't know if that's just me speculating, but I do think there's eventually going to be a middle ground. Now, Brian Burns is not Nick Bosa. He's not. Nick Bosa affects the game in pretty much every way, but if you watched Sunday, you saw that the Falcons basically adjusted their entire game plan to the success that Brian Burns, Derek Brown, and the front seven were having. Like they literally either ran the ball or ran the ball adjacent by throwing to running backs in the flat.
Yeah, all those passes were run plays.
Right, exactly. So if you look at it that way, they threw to running backs 9 times for 46 yards and a touchdown. They ran the ball 26 times for 130 yards. So that's 176 yards in rushing or rushing adjacent plays and 3 touchdowns. They basically had to change their script. The passing game was not working. So he did take over a game there. I don't think he deserves a blank check. That's not a thing. So I
agree.
So I think I push back on the idea that the Panthers don't value him. It might be that they don't value him at Burns's self-worth.
Or what his agent says we can really get here because we got them in a pinch.
Right. The reason why they have them in a pinch, if you want to rewind, is because they turned down that mega trade with the Rams for 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick, which implies that he is a franchise player, a top-of-the-level player, an untradeable player. Well, if that's accurate, what Brian Burns wants is not unrealistic. Whether he wants top-of-the-market money or not, he has that leverage. And I think that's been the issue, and I guess the confusion is Burns has been treated like a top-level player to the nth degree I mean, they came out and they were like, we want him here. We're not going to trade him. He was untouchable. He was untouchable in the Rams deal. He was untouchable in the Bears deal. Cool. Well, if he's an untouchable player, then you have to commit to him financially. And I think Brian Burns wants what he wants. And I think Nick Bosa really shook up the market. And that's why it was kind of a race here, just like as it is with quarterbacks. And it
was way bigger. The Bosa deal was even bigger than anyone expected.
Right. There were people in the 49ers building that were surprised. Like, this is
it's bananas. It's funny money, dude. Like, it's almost like, how the heck does people generate this? Do you think that why I've been covering the Panthers now from the fan perspective for 10 years, and we've been going through contract talks and things. And in 2012, everyone wanted to be the guy that was the highest paid. Like, you got the tweet, and it was like, oh, he's got the highest paid defensive end. But then when you really delved into the contract negotiations, you saw the years on the back end that could get out of it. The guaranteed money has always been the real story of contracts to me, from any standpoint where it goes. I mean, look at Lamar and trying to get the fully guaranteed. Why is it that this narrative this year with the Bosa, Brian Burns has just been on the average contract? Like, I just hear 30, 28, 30, 28. It's like there's no nuance to it. Is this the way contracts are moving now?
I mean, it does seem like everybody wants to win the PR battle. And really, Brian Burns has publicly won the PR battle, right? He was Mr. Team Captain. He showed up to training camp. He worked in training camp. Yeah,
all the fans are sitting there, pay.
Right. All of his teammates are saying it. I think what they did was smart. They waited till right before week 1 to make a stink and let everybody know.
Right. Yeah.
And then he goes and practices. So, yeah, I think he's done kind of everything to win the PR battle. It's just a matter of whether the Panthers are willing to pay for that. And I think,
is there any chance they just make him play his 5th-year option?
Well, I think they would love to get him signed. I just think it's whether Brian thinks the money is worth it, right? Like, it's a two-way street here. So
where do you think their ceiling is?
I don't know. I really don't. Like, it would be unfair for me to speculate, but I think 28 million is reasonable. That's what I.
If it's any more than that, it seems wild, because you're talking like 15% of the cap.
Right. Well, I mean, the way you would massage that too is you would give him a large signing bonus that takes out a lot of that chunk of money, and you'd spread it out. But yeah, and the cap keeps rising. Like, there are ways to accomplish this. You could do it front loaded, where it's, if it's a short-term deal, you can front load the first 2 years, and then you just know you're talking in year 3.
But if it's 80 million guaranteed over 5 years, you're sitting there putting almost 18 million out a year without even touching the salary. And that's all against the cap. That's 10% of $180 million.
Yeah. Aren't you glad you're not Samir Solomon right now?
No kidding.
I mean, look, I think the Panthers are a practical organization when it comes to contracts. If you look at the way they work and operate, I mean, they have re-signed guys who were integral to them. I mean, to me, the Christian McCaffrey deal is insane for where they were at that point and all that stuff.
But that was just to keep a name that fans could believe in for a moment after a 2,000-yard season.
Sure. They paid Shaq Thompson. Shaq Thompson's contract needed to be renegotiated. Ian Thomas needed to be for better or worse, right? Needed to be renegotiated. I think, Dante Jackson was another guy. I know he's very polarizing, but like, it's not like they haven't paid internal guys. But if I'm Derek Brown, I'm watching how this plays out. I mean, here's the thing too, like, Derek Brown's contract's probably a lot more cut and dry than Brian Burns's, because he doesn't have the sack numbers, but you clearly know his value. And on top of that, you didn't turn down a mega trade for him. So,
right.
The leverage is a little different. And so I think a lot of people are going to be watching this around the league and in the locker room and seeing what happens. I see both sides of the argument. Like, I recently wrote that they should pay Brian Burns, and, in context, that's within reason.
Yeah, they kind of backed themselves into this corner. Right. You talked about a couple of things that put them in this position, but I think if you just look at the personnel in general, they're so built and dependent on him in the pass rush. And then you can go back as far as them letting Hassan Reddick walk and saying, like, we're going to kind of go this Brian Burns direction. So as we speak about the defense, I heard you ask, and I'm glad you asked this question to Frank Reich and his press conference yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And that is, are concerns about this run defense. The Carolina Panthers, boy, we have not been able to stop the run for some time now. It's been a long time. And it goes back to when Ron Rivera kind of semi-switched to this 3-4, half-hearted switch to 3-4 in his last year. And 3-4 defenses are notoriously porous against the run. Like that, it seems to be the way to attack them. And I'm not an X and O's guy, but that's what I've seen. Carolina Panthers, my friend, we were arguing about this on the podcast, and people were like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I was like, man, look, let's look through each drive right here. 20-yard run, 18-yard run, 8-yard run, 4-yard run. These guys were averaging over 5 yards a carry against the Carolina Panthers. What do you think about, tell us what Frank Reich said, and do you think that they can improve this some?
Well, Reich used numbers to justify that he thought they were fine against the run.
Like first down wins and stuff like that.
First down wins. They got guys off on third down 8 of 10 times. Like, that's fine, but context is necessary, right? So we talked about it earlier in the show. 176 yards and 3 touchdowns produced by run or run adjacent plays. On most of those plays, there were broken tackles. There was there were poor angles taken. There were, loose tackling attempts. Frankie Louvu, he's a missile, but when that missile misses, whew,
yeah,
bad things happen for that Panthers defense. Look, Frank Reich gave credit to the Falcons running backs. They deserve it. They were very good. But I feel like the scheme is fine. The scheme is fine. I thought the calls were fine. Everything was fine. Nobody was really out of place. I thought Evero did a pretty good job. But the execution, especially from a tackling standpoint, has me genuinely concerned. Because I don't think they're particularly talented against the run to begin with. So not having, the ability to form tackle consistently is a problem. I didn't think Von Bell played particularly well, which was surprising for me. I thought Shaq played well. I think he didn't get a lot of help. Deshaun Williams, who's a very good rotational pass rusher, run stopping was not for him. And by the way, they don't have that big nose tackle. So
yeah.
That I talked to you about.
Did we ever find out what the heck happened with McCall?
I just think he wasn't like an organizational fit. I think there's probably more to the story, but
I agree.
Nobody would nothing confirmable. I think too, when you look at the dynamics of this team, like you said, in a 3-4, you're spread out a little bit more. I do think that's kind of the argument against Brian Burns' contract too. It's like, I don't think he actively didn't try to play the run, but there were some rough moments for his side of the field. I think this is a team that is trying to figure it out. And look, I was all for resting guys in the preseason to an extent, but like when you don't have that live action and both of your starting edge rushers don't play throughout the preseason, and you haven't figured out your defensive front grouping until literally week 1, that's a problem. I think
zero rotation too, as well.
Yeah, well, I would agree with Frank in that they played significantly less snaps than the offense. So the offense played 70-something snaps. The defense only played like 50-something snaps. I also don't know that Yetur Gross-Matos is the solution here that you're looking for, right? I know there's a stat out there that he's a pretty good run stopper, but there were definitely occasions last year where he took the wrong gap or wasn't particularly in good position. He's also a weird system fit. I've said this throughout the offseason and into the summer. Every chance I've gotten, he does not fit this defense. And having 4 snaps kind of proves it. I mean, they've tried.
Yeah. Nobody likes him. I know that's so mean to say, but like he just kind of gets washed into the background.
I actually think he can be a reasonable rotational 4-3 end. I mean, that's what he is. I just think it's a really odd fit. I'm not even criticizing him. He's just an awkward fit for the system. And then, lo and behold, third round pick DJ Johnson, who you hired to set the edge, didn't even play. So I just, yeah, man, it is. It's rough out there in them parts, especially when it comes to stopping the run. I was not. I understand what Frank was trying to get across, but I don't agree with him, if that makes sense.
Bryce Young had the opportunity to be the first rookie quarterback in 21 years or so to win his rookie debut. We saw Anthony Richardson lose in his debut. We saw, who else was it? CJ Stroud. Look, Cam Newton, who had set a rookie record in 2011 for passing yards in his debut, didn't win. Andrew Luck didn't win. Joe Burrow didn't win. Justin Herbert didn't win. Bryce Young didn't win. What happened in this game for Bryce Young? What'd you think about the performance?
I thought he made good decisions for the most part. Those 2 interceptions up the seam were rough. Frank took blame for the first one where they were backed up in the red zone. It kind of seemed like a panic throw. He had some inaccurate tosses, no doubt. I gave the passing game a D in my report card, which you can read on charlotteobserver.com.
I'm a subscriber.
Yeah. Hey, so I don't know. There were good things. I mean, I do think I agree with Frank. His decision-making on throwing the ball away was smart. I don't think he really forced the ball too much.
I thought he was fine. 2 picks. That's it. That's the end of the story is 2 picks, 1 overthrow to Mingo, and Terrace Marshall Jr. pulls up on a route. That's Ron Rivera used to say, the games come down to 2 or 3 plays. And that's really it was the same exact pick twice.
And what I'll say too, is I think the pistol formation is going to work out really well for this team.
Really?
Yeah, I do. Here's why.
It looks so strange to have a running back 20 yards in the backfield. It feels like he's 5 yards behind the guy and he's in shotgun.
Well, what's interesting about that is it gives him a rev up period, right? So,
like a freaking jet runway.
Right. So what you would do with pistol, for those who don't know, is it allows you to see the defense fully, like you're under center, but you don't have to drop back, which allows you to keep your eyes up. And so that way, Bryce doesn't have to think about placement on the field. We just talked about Smith-Marset and where he didn't know where he was. It's one less thing for him to think about. It's also less for the running back to think about, because when you're doing a design run, you have less vision there. Like, you don't have the vision you would if he was under center or if you were to his side. So you're basically going to your target mark. And so I think that kind of helps make the game a little bit simpler. Do
you ever hand the ball off like that?
Yeah, all the time.
God, it looks so bizarre.
And so what's also interesting too, Bryce Young, you know how many snaps he had under center in Alabama?
Oh, like 2. I think it was 2 total in his whole career.
Well, he had 1%. 1%.
Oh, 1%.
So, I mean, they did stuff under center in this game. They were actually pretty successful with it too. Chuba Hubbard picked up some chunk yardage off of it. But I think pistol's like a nice little wrinkle. I didn't catch the percentage that they used it, but I thought it was interesting. You can also run, that triangle sort of 31 personnel look where you have the fullback to his left or right and another running back to the opposite side and a guy behind. There's a lot of fun you can play with it. It allows you to kind of mold the backfield a little bit. I think it'll be good for Laviska Shenault if we see him used the way he was in this game as well. So I'm intrigued by it. I thought the play design was cool. I thought they were very fluid and it was pretty fascinating to watch how many personnel groupings they use. They pretty much used every grouping under the sun. And look, it's hard to evaluate an offense and a quarterback off of, one game where 3 possessions were stunted by turnovers in the middle of the field or worse.
And Frank said, the 4th and 1 is equivalent to a turnover.
Right. And look, the offense flowed in that first drive. And remember,
then a 6 for 6 on the other one for a touchdown.
Right.
They were feeling it in the first half.
Yeah, I think, I think if they score a touchdown on that opening drive, this is a completely different game. I also think that it was the right call to go for it.
Totally.
I've received a lot of emails and tweets about it, and it's just like, no, that's the right call. That was
I almost wanted them to go for it on the other one where they kicked the field goal. It was 4th and 3.
Yeah. Well, 4th and 3 is a little bit. I mean, I understand.
They were dealing though, man. Bryce was feeling it. It just looked like it was just like, man, we can make this happen. But it, I mean, I understand that we took the points. We're tied up at the half, and there you go. Last night, Aaron Rodgers ruptures his Achilles on Monday Night Football. Horrible to watch, man. It makes. I'm not super cringy, but boy, it just got me. Ugh. You said this year's all about Bryce Young. And I'm a fan here, so I got to say something fanatical. Is any chance the team could be interested in Andy Dalton? The Jets?
I wouldn't be if I were another team.
You say you wouldn't be?
I wouldn't be. No, I mean, I think Andy's what Andy is. Like, I don't think that his upside is taking. I mean, he's played with talented teams and never really shined in the playoffs. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation because he'd have to learn the offense on the fly. You're putting him ahead of a guy who, for all his faults, did just lead a team to victory.
He didn't look great though.
He didn't. No, look, I'm not a Zach Wilson apologist, but I also think like at some point, like this staff was given this roster, they've paid a ton of money. You have limited draft assets because of this Aaron Rodgers trade. Figure it out, right?
Like, so it just sucks for Jets fans as usual.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you've got to feel out the process. Maybe if you can contend up until the trade deadline, then you make the move. But it's just like they're going to have to ride that running game. They're going to have to hope that all this PR that's gone Zach Wilson's way since Aaron Rodgers has gotten there is actually reality. And we'll see. I mean, they have a lot of talent. When you have a lot of talent, you can uplift a quarterback. It the same way as a quarterback can uplift talent. Look, we saw it with Nick Foles and Frank Reich.
Yeah, totally.
Ago, right. So.
All right. Last question for you. And we get you out of here is Aaron Rodgers. Again, circling back to that is the high profile, so much hype, so much attention when it comes to Hard Knocks and just the Aaron Rodgers train, which I was very excited about. I actually lost my fantasy football matchup by 1 point. And I was 1 point down and I had Aaron Rodgers starting. So, I mean, 4 plays in, does maybe the high profile nature of Aaron Rodgers, does it do anything for this continued call for players who are advocating for more and more grass fields? We know that the Panthers players have kind of been on the forefront of that discussion. Any idea if that story has any legs at all, or is this just at the end of the day something that's always going to have to be like the players just going to have to suck it up and it just is what it is?
Well, I think it's extremely fresh. We're recording it less than 24 hours after it happened, but if there was an injury, right, that would change things, you would think it'd be this one because, listen, the NFL has kind of built this season around Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets. I mean,
yeah.
If you look at all the broadcasts that they're scheduled to be on between this and Hard Knocks and how public this is, and then you look at the Giants going 40 and they're losing 40-0. The league likes it when New York teams do well, like any league does, right? Because
there's no way this was in the script,
right? Yeah, I think I think it's one of those things where you're just kind of like the win in the NFL sales kind of took a hit, last night. Like it was rough to see, like it was tough, and I think Aaron Rodgers has had this whole redemption tour where I know he's gotten some bad press depending on what your beliefs are. And
I know I love him. I fell in love with, I didn't have an opinion on him actually before. Actually, I always really liked him as a player. Didn't really care about his play. He didn't rub me the wrong way. But man, yeah. I mean, he was like, it was a gravity pull towards him in this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a polarizing guy just in general, but like, I mean, he had a lot of goodwill coming into the season. The whole run out with the American flag thing was pretty cool. They're playing
totally.
on two New York teams are playing on 9/11. I mean, it's just odd that this kind of happened the way it did. And I got to tell you, I don't know how much you've interacted with Jets fans, but Jets fans are awesome, and they are rabid and they are dedicated, and it's just like
I feel bad for them.
Yeah, they've taken one lump after the other. I mean, Panthers fans have been through their troubles as well, but like this
it's like a Browns fan, man. Like I appreciate Browns fans. I'm like, gosh, you guys, I could not imagine being a writer or a podcaster for the Jets right now. Like how miserable does this season go forward?
Well, I mean, I have friends, a lot of friends actually, oddly enough on that beat. And, if you're a good storyteller, you can find the stories. If you're a good reporter, you can find the good news and the nuggets. I mean,
boy, you were about to have magic, though, you thought.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd imagine it's very cool to cover a Super Bowl team. I covered the Eagles in between their 2 Super Bowl appearances, but it's tough. It's tough because you've spilt so much ink on this quarterback and this team, and they've done so much. And
I mean, you saw Robert Saleh's face on the sideline, it was like, oh my God, I've never seen such a tough, mean man look so sad. And he was broken. I mean, he looked emotionally hurt, and you saw him talking all through. These guys, those coaches thought that man, they were like, this is the real deal. This is different. This guy's different. So. Tough stuff. All right, Mike, thanks for your time. I want to say this first. I want to plug the Charlotte Observer. I'm going to let you do some plugging, but I gotta say this as a subscriber to the Charlotte Observer myself, you can't really find more coverage of the Carolina Panthers. You guys put out a ton of content, period. You cover every angle, number one, but the volume of coverage, and it's not just superficial coverage. I'm telling you guys, is you could go to different places, you get one story here, one story there. You guys are putting multiple stories out almost daily. It's heavy hitting. I love it. So I'm a big supporter of the Charlotte Observer. Tell our listeners how they can support the local beat.
Well, you can subscribe to the Observer, as you said, and you can follow Alex Zutlow on Twitter. He's my great partner. I know you guys have had him on the podcast as well. Scott Fowler, the legend. And then there's me, Mike _E_K on X, which sounds weird.
I hate it. I know it's weird. It's like, do we just keep calling it Twitter?
I do.
Yeah, I do. I know, but I feel like it's like calling the Redskins the Redskins.
Right. Yeah, fair.
Or the Commanders the Redskins.
Yeah. I mean, like, to me, it's
without the racism, I guess.
Yeah. Well, at least there's that. I was on a national show the other day, and they said Twitter, and then they corrected themselves and said X, and I was like, wow, that's interesting.
I know. I hate saying I like repost. Oh man, retweet. It did enter our dialogue. Yeah, fantastic stuff. Are there any deals for the Observer, or did they miss out on that? Is it
I believe it's $1 for the first month.
Boom, $1 for the first month, guys. There's a lot of stuff. Man, you better get in there for football season. And on top of that, you guys cover a ton of stuff for college football and college basketball on the approach. So, guys, Charlotte Observer, go support that. And you're missing out if you don't. All right, Mike, thanks for your time, man. We'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks for having me.